Well, happy Monday, everyone. It's Greg Dixon, your story whisperer, and I'm here with Amy Lanci, and we're going to talk about stories. And starting with what's your story? You had something you wanted to talk about. Like people have their own old stories, and some people will say you need to overcome them. But I think your idea was you need to understand them and embrace them. And do you want to
Yeah.
elaborate what you had in mind with that?
Yes. So first of all, hi everyone. My name is Amy Lanci. I am the founder of Untold Story Enterprises, and as a storytelling consultant, I help my clients who are entrepreneurs and organizations to figure out, what is the heart of the story that they need to tell their audience in order to engage them and to connect with them. And I'm also almost three-time published author, so I'm excited about that. And yeah, I know that in the personal development world, whenever we're talking about growing personally and starting a new chapter, um, we're always thinking about, we're always we always hear the saying, don't listen to your old stories. And I'm actually the one person out of all those people that's saying, no, I think you actually do need to listen to your old stories, but like, don't be consumed by them. So in other words, I look at, we go through highs and lows in life. And while I'll never say like, oh, this was meant to be for you, whenever like, something happened to you, I will say that there is a lesson behind everything that you experience. And that, until we learn whatever that lesson is in that experience, we can't truly move on in our lives. We can't truly be the people that we want the world to see. And so, if you listen, if you embrace your story, all the pieces of it, and you listen to it, and you're not living in it in such a way where you're saying, hey, okay, so this happened, um but there was this thing that because this thing happened, this influenced me to learn this part of myself. And or I grew this part of myself, and then I blossomed in this way. The more you understand that, the more that you can actually embrace who you are and understand what your unique voice is in this world.
No, that's great. Yeah, for sure. And I think there are all sorts of lessons in the stories. I kind of uh had some things that are, other people say embarrassing and you're trying to forget it, but kind
Yeah.
of weird notion. I loaned a bike to somebody, and I didn't really expect it to get back, and then I got it back, and I made it about 6 feet. We were at a sort of a men's group thing, and I made it about 6 feet, bounced out of a car, went for a header. My phone flew across, one of my shoes flew across, and my brother sort of caught this out of the corner of his eye. He says, and I just sort of said, I wish you had caught that on video. It would have been
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
so, so anyway, but yeah. So in your storytelling consulting, your practice there. So how do you embrace people's stories?
I embrace people's stories by understanding that there is a why in the center, right? There's a why, there's a reason why they started this business. There's a reason why this organization was birthed in the first place. And so just getting to the heart of that original vision, and then understanding, getting a better idea of what the vision is moving forward. Um, and then figuring out like what is the story that needs to be told in terms of like how things got started, what is the why, but also what is the story that the audience needs to hear. So for instance, when I embraced my own story, recognizing that I was a speech delayed child, and that really had a toll on my low self-esteem and the way I felt about myself for most of my life. And then realizing that that little girl, she wasn't talking, but she was becoming a really good listener and listening for things that people normally would miss, or listening for things that people are saying without actually speaking them out loud, like body language and different shifts in the energy. Once I embraced that part of myself, I recognized that, that was the birth that being speech delayed was the birthplace of my gifts. And so me as a communication consultant, I recognized that I had to embrace that part of myself to understand that I have a way of listening to people when I work with them. And so going back to, what is the story? How do I find out what the story is with my clients? It's about listening to what they are trying to convey and helping them find the words for that. And then also just, like I said earlier, diving deeper into that vision, and really, and also taking into account, who are they really really looking to help, and why is that so important, and what is their story, what is keeping them up at night.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And yeah, we were introduced by sort of a mutual friend in Australia. You know,
Yeah.
and and I think she thought because we both were interested in stories, I think that's what she thought, that saw the
Well,
common ground in.
actually, I found you through her, and I was like, I saw your profile, and I asked her for an introduction to you.
Oh,
So
okay, there you go. Yeah,
so
that's
so I researched you on LinkedIn.
oh yeah. Yeah, we were just talking before we started the broadcast about because I didn't know who Amy was, and then we got introduced, and then I was just looking at our mutual connections, and it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting
Mm-hmm.
because I've got like 26 mutual connections with Amy and with
Mm-hmm.
you, and they're from all sorts of, and there's some really interesting stories with some of those people that will
Yeah.
show up in another episode or book or something. But
Right.
it was just interesting how people are connected,
Oh gosh,
and
yeah.
with the story. And I think one of the things is, from a business point of view, is get out and tell your story, right? And you know
Yes.
how you got involved. I went to what was that, Ben and Jerry's in Vermont, and
Hmm.
they do a really good job of telling their company origin stories.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's really cute. They've got a wall of fame with all the current flavors, and they've got a graveyard in the back of all the ones the retired
Oh.
yeah. And yeah, the few I've run across a few businesses. There's the Collins Street Bakery in Texas, and they have a really interesting story, and they're pretty good at it when you go visit the website or their one of their facilities. They went from a little, mom and pop um, uh, bakery, uh, with the horse and buggy, to shipping out a million Christmas cakes a year. So that's an interesting story too. So
Oh
so you
yeah.
never know, right? How your story is going to relate to your business, and
No.
people get obsessed with why. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying is why, how did you end up here? Other
Yeah,
than
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And sometimes I'll go to some businesses' websites, whether they are small, medium, or big, and I'll go to their about page, and I just say their about page, but it doesn't actually have their story on there. It just kind of states what the company is, what
yeah,
industry they are, and then like, oh, please buy our stuff, and that's it. And I'm like, wait, but you had you have an opportunity to connect with your audience
oh yeah,
on
yeah.
here by telling the deeper story, like, man.
I,
So yeah, I was
yeah, I
just
think
gonna say the your about page is not your resume. uh
no,
mm-mm,
yeah,
mm-mm, no. So
yeah, no, not your resume, and I think there's a lot of well, one of my practices is if I go to meet somebody in a networking group, and then I'll go see their LinkedIn profile, and then take a look at their website. And many don't have anything, or they don't tell their story, or it's a cookie cutter
right.
website that it
Yeah.
looks pretty, but it does nothing for them. so, so,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. I think people are really good at describing what they do, um, and how they do it, but not as well about why they do it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's what the story comes in.
yeah. The story. So my background in story is, with Bonnie and another friend of ours in Washington State, in Vancouver, Washington. We were living in Vancouver, British Columbia at the time, but we started a thing called Tell Your Story Productions with
Mm,
biography and things, family and business, and but mostly family and personal stories.
mhm.
And then the three of us also did toured up and down the I-5 corridor doing interviews with people in the natural health movement,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
pioneers. So that was another kind of story production that we did. And last year at this time, I did a broadcast encouraging people when they're meeting up with their family at Christmas time, maybe try to capture people's stories using a phone. Just you can take photos, take lots of photos. You know, if you've got somebody telling stories, put the phone out there and push it on record. Maybe
Mhm.
videotape them, but even just record it because there will be people that are at your dinner table this year that won't be at the dinner table next year. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
so you
Yeah.
capture it when you can, and that's
Yes.
part of the service we do. We sort of teach people how to do it and then put it together into packages,
I love it.
and it's kind of fun. It's been some of the most interesting things I've done over the last 10 years have been related to doing that.
I love that you're teaching people how to capture the memories and capture the stories. And because you're right, the people around the dinner table, that's the only moment you for sure you're going to get everyone together
Yeah,
in that on that specific day. And so I think that to be able to share that story or to get that story and then to share it with the world.
yeah,
And I think it says something to the person who you're listening to, right? Like you're showing them that how much they mean to you by listening to their story.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I one of the ones I captured was my Uncle Joe in Alberta. He was
Hmm.
kind of the black sheep of the family. I'm the only one of the cousins that actually went and helped him with his farm work. He went in for an operation one year, and
Hmm.
he was in World War II and had stories. And he liked to talk a lot. Like I would be there, and he would be telling me these stories, and I'd pass out. His audience didn't even need to be conscious, really.
Right.
And but I got the video camera and I said, well, let's tell your story. Anyway, he did this whole thing from birth to college to getting
Wow.
married to rescuing Holland during World War
Wow.
II in about 5 minutes. I says, what?
Wow.
You,
That's
you've
amazing.
told me 15 hours of stories and it all got really reduced to 5 minutes. But
Oh
it's
my gosh. That's amazing.
but I got it, so yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I know that sometimes I look back to my grandparents who are some. I have one grandparent that's still alive, but the other three are no longer with us. And one of them, I wish I had an opportunity to interview him now because he was a Chinese immigrant who fought in World War II for the U.S. Army, and that's how he got his citizenship here. And I would have loved to have. I mean, he died before I was born, but I would have loved to have had a conversation or an interview with him to talk about like what was that like back then, like, and what was that like to fight for a country that you want citizenship for. What does that mean?
Yeah,
What happened? It's just to just get that inside scoop that unfortunately I'll never truly get. All I can do is speculate.
yeah,
But so I'm really glad you got that story you just
yeah.
mentioned.
I think that's true of many veterans. Is a lot of them have stories.
Mhm.
Like we go to a
Yes.
local legion, and somebody will say, "Oh, see that person over there? Picking up the glasses." They have they know their whole story, right? But they don't. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't talk to people about their experiences or their stories, and you just never really know.
Right, right. But on the flip side of it, we speaking of veterans, I did get to meet my husband's grandfather, who also fought in World War II and also for the U.S. Army. And I can't remember what his exact job title was, but his role was to build a bridge for the U.S. troops to cross while there was battle going on. So could you imagine like trying to build a bridge with the rest of your troop while like there was like fighting going on around you. Like I just like it was amazing to meet him in person and to hear his stories and to just just be able to congratulate him on his service, to be able to appreciate him and honor him for what he was able to accomplish and the sacrifices he made.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a I think that what the takeaway here is that, veterans, especially and everyone, we have something we contributed to the world, and a lot of times until we tell that the story of that, it's, it goes, that contribution goes unsaid, and I think that contribution needs to be known for the rest of us to understand, in order for us to honor everyone.
Yeah. And honor everyone. And
Yeah.
sometimes going through your own story is cathartic, right?
Oh
You
yes. Yeah.
you
Hmm.
you go through it, and even if nobody else, you don't share it with anybody, sometimes it's worthwhile, you
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
to
Oh
just
yeah.
revisit it. As I think you said, some people don't get caught up in your old stories, but sometimes, that helps understand where you are today, really.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think that what it is that, and I used to say this more often, that, at different times in our lives, we are running from our story, we're living in our story, and we're owning our story. And this happens, like, it's not like we hit own your story and then, like, we never come back to the other two stages. Like, no, we're constantly kind of cycling through. And that just goes back to thinking about, whenever we have some kind of experience, whether it's good, or whether it's positive, or whether it's negative, to be able to kind of go through the process of, okay, this happened, kind of sitting with it, going through the emotions, whatever was brought up, and then, seeing what was the lesson and all of that. I mean, it's a lot. It's a big process, but the more I find that I do that, the more I heal from some stuff from the past. And I think that if we're doing as much healing as we can from the past, the more we can move forward into a brighter future. And so I think it's really important to really see our story for what it is. Don't like listen to the old stories in order to learn from them, but don't stay there. Like, that's not the destination. The destination is here in the present and moving forward. Um, but yeah, the it also doesn't help us at all by pretending an old story never happened.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a fine balance.
it's a fine balance for sure.
Oh
So
yeah.
you said you're about to publish your third book. Can you describe the books that you've written so far?
Oh
And
gosh, yeah. Okay, so the first two books I have written, they are both nonfiction books, and they're related directly to communication. So the first book I wrote is called Listen Up, and that one I published last year in 2023. And that one I talk about how my experience of being in the science field and the creative entrepreneurial field, as well as the spiritual communities, I recognize that there are different communication cues and strategies when you're speaking to someone who is, heavily from one of those communities. It's not meant to be a cookie cutter formula. It's just meant to be like, this, just kind of understand where this person might be coming from, what they might need to hear from you in order to, trust you a little bit more, and to, give some tips on how to, um, connect with them deeper. So that I talk all about that in my first book, Listen Up. And then the second book is the Email Communication Bible. I published that earlier this year, and that one talks about, how do you communicate better through email in a professional setting, because a lot of times when we are speaking to each other, face to face, whether on Zoom or in person, we are able to read each other's body language and the tone of voice, and kind of read each other much more readily, and it's easier to communicate in a lot of ways. But through email, you lose all of that. So what do? How do you craft emails in such a way where it's clear on what the email is about, what the message is, and also how do you craft in such a way where the other person will easily understand it, and also, if it's a very touchy subject, how do you keep it very solution based and try to word it carefully in such a way where it doesn't create more conflict. It gets you more in the solution based scenario. So that's what my second book, the Email Communication Bible, is about. Both are available on Amazon, and then the third book that's coming out. The ebook is actually coming out tomorrow, but the print book is coming out this Friday, and it's my first kids novel. It's called The Voice Within, and it features my daughter as the main character in this very fictional world. It's my very first fictional publication, and basically, my daughter is transported from our world to a magical world where there is a black swan and a sleeping queen, and somehow she's got to find her way home. And this is a multi-book series, so this is one of three. But the Voice Within focuses on teaching children how to listen to their intuition. I'm just really tickled that it's finally coming out.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So going back to your second one, I kind of preach that people need to be sending out more emails than they do, and I should be listening to my own advice sometimes. It's kind of funny. Like the people who actually are really successful send out at least once a week, maybe
Right.
7 times a week,
Right.
it has to be, entertaining and informative, but
Mhm.
along a theme. Like there are some people who are really good at it, and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I personally feel like with newsletters, with email campaigns, yeah, they gotta be fun. They gotta be entertaining. They gotta be full of value. They also gotta be true to your brand voice,
yeah,
and address something that maybe your audience is wondering about, like, oh, how do I set the table for Thanksgiving dinner? Like, I mean, I can't speak on that, but like that's like a good fun example what to talk about. And then also, in the second book that I wrote, the Email Communication Bible, I talk about, I give some examples of, if a client hasn't paid their invoice yet, how do you word that in an email? Because that's a little touchy, but it's very important, and you can't exactly avoid that. So yeah, I think that, like, with email marketing, it's a part of emails that can be fun and entertaining and deeply touching, depending on your audience and your brand, and what you're offering, and how you want to communicate with them. With that one-to-one email, when you're communicating with people in your team or people who are your clients or prospective clients, there's a lot of back and forth potentially, and a lot of empathy is needed in order to get a better idea of how do you say something to someone in a way that gets you to the finish line of where you want to go. Like, how do you tell that client, like, please pay my invoice in a nice way, and hopefully do in such a way where they get the idea right away and they just do it.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I subscribed to Dave D's email. He was with Dan Kennedy's GKIC. That's where I first met him, and now he's a sales coach. But he writes something along what you mentioned there. It's almost always some experience, like they go to an Italian restaurant, or they go somewhere, or they, you know, horror movies, or the horror of the Miami Dolphins. He says sometimes it's not the best thing in the world to be a Miami Dolphin fan, but but anyway, but it was, I read them every day, and then in fact one day I didn't seem to get it, so I've subscribed again. I think I was subscribed 3 times, and anyway, I told him that in a mastermind class, and he says, "Yeah, well, my rule is if you're subscribed 3 times, you need to pay 3 times."
Oh, I see.
No, it was just joking, but it was just. But other people, I think some people don't like emailing because I think they project. they think, well, all my friends don't like to get too many emails,
They
and,
do.
and
Yeah, they do.
it's the
And
same
I
as
get that. Yeah.
yeah, and they said, well, I wouldn't want somebody to send me something once a day, so I'm not going to do it. But I not, you don't have to do it once a day, but once a week at least, anyway, just to keep in touch and let them know what you're doing. Tell them a story. So yeah,
Right, right, right. Tell them a story or just yeah, just to keep in touch. It doesn't always have to be not every I mean it's in a way every email is a marketing and sales email, but it doesn't have to be salesy
yeah,
every time, right? Like it could just be like, let me share what I've been up to lately and
yeah,
just like give the behind the scenes look of it and have the behind the scenes story of it. But it doesn't have to be like buy now, buy buy
yeah,
buy buy
yeah.
buy.
Yeah, with Dave D's email, it's just like a subject line. Says there are three ways of learning more, right? One
Yeah,
is to sign up for a Facebook group. One's to sign up for this mastermind that I'm a member of, which I
yeah,
took probably 10 years before I actually held my credit card to the screen. So I'm one of these slow adopters, right?
yeah.
You can't just send somebody one note and get them to sign up.
No.
Though, though I signed up for something yesterday on first exposure, and there was something else on learning how to play piano that I would have done if I had the money. On
Right.
the, I went from not knowing who this person was to 2 hours later, wishing I had more credit on my credit card. So there's
Right.
something he did something right.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so are you working with coaching clients? Do you how do you work with people? So
I work with them in terms of coaching and consulting. I call it my story mapping process. So
okay,
if you imagine like a mind map, like normally people use mind maps for ideas, but
yes,
I call it story mapping because we are essentially building out, what is the main story and what are some other stories that you can
yeah,
tell along the way, and what do these stories tell people about your brand? Do they tell them about your core values? Do they tell you? Do they talk about what you stand for? Do they talk about what you offer? Like yeah, that's how I work with my clients. Like we figure out, okay, this is the story. This is the big brand story that you need to tell, but also, what are some other stories that are just kind of adjacent to all of that?
yeah. No, that's great. And they can reach out to you through LinkedIn, or
Yes.
do you have
Mhm.
a website or something you can share? But
Yes.
anyway, and I'll
Yes.
put all this stuff. I'm going to put links to your books and things
Thank
in the
you.
chat later.
Yay! Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and your website and things. And so, what's the process? They reach out, and you have a discovery, and then see.
Yes, yes. So basically, you can reach out to me through LinkedIn or through my website or through my email, which it's amy at untoldstory.enterprises.com, and then we'll book a discovery call. I always love to learn about people who are interested in my services myself. So that way I can, ask them different questions and just kind of get a feel of what they're really looking for, and figuring out like, is it, do I have the services that they need right now, or is it something that is something else needed there? Do I need to refer them to someone else? So do they need to talk to Greg, or do they need to talk to Amy, basically? So it's like I love talking to people, so that way I get to know them, they get to know me. I love that they ask me questions and they can give me feedback. And then after, like, after we get to know each other, I'll usually, send a proposal, or we'll discuss things further there, and then yeah, and then we'll keep
Yeah,
going from
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. So how I see some of our services as being complementary. So I like publishing the stories
Hmm.
in almost any format. Like almost
Yeah.
everything I've ever put out has been completely different,
Right.
including I put together like a personal musical story for somebody I played music with,
Oh,
and
okay.
it all ended up being video and stories and photos that we put together and put it on USB keys with
Mm. Okay.
in the shape of a piano, that she put into a gift box to give her granddaughters. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so everyone's been unique, but I can help
Love it.
people put together and publish the stories, including books too. So
I love it. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I have now published almost 3 books now. After talking to you, I feel like you are such a huge expert in that field, because here I was talking about certain things with KDP and Ingram Spark, and you're like, yeah, well, if you do this and you do that, but if you do this, then that will happen. Like, oh man, it sounds like this man has been through like hundreds of scenarios with
well,
these 2
yeah,
platforms.
I I have 2 projects that I'm this broadcast is a form of procrastination. I should be doing the final editing and formatting and
Okay.
getting them out. One of them's related to Christmas. We're running out of Christmas
Oh
season.
man. Oh man.
but we put it out last year. It's called Tales from the Turkey Table,
I
and
love
it's a
it.
little bit adult oriented, sort of snarky stories based on experience. And I created a big warning label to go on the back of the book. This is not for children's ears, really. But
I'm glad you put that disclaimer there, so that way parents know, right? Like, oh, okay, wait. That this is a book for me, not for my kids.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And I deliberately put an image on the back cover that indicates that this is not necessarily your standard Christmas.
right,
Though
right, right, right,
So
right.
I don't think Grimm's fairy tales were really appropriate for children either. So
No, I don't know how that slipped through the
like,
cracks,
like
but
that's holy smokes! Wow, man, there's some kind of
it's so
Stephen King
dark.
300 years ago wrote these things, right?
It was meant to scare children, and now that we're at the point where we don't want to scare children,
Yeah, I
oh no.
I shudder to think how many years of therapy some people got out of those.
Oh man.
I used to go into a like a aquasize and hang
Uh-huh.
out, and I would go into uh the hot tub later, and
Uh-huh.
they had like little kids, right? They would go and they would go swimming with them, then they go to the hot tub and they would sing these songs, and I was listening to the words. Wow, there's some kind of twisted lyrics to those fairy
Oh,
songs.
ring around a
Oh
rosy.
yeah, well
Rosy and
that
London
was
Bridge.
about
Oh yeah.
smallpox or something,
Yes.
and then, yeah, and then
And then London Bridge is falling down because London
yeah,
Bridge fell
and
down.
little itsy bitsy spiders going down
Oh yeah.
and all ends in a gruesome death. It's
I know. I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. I did not I aim to not do anything like that in my book that's coming out tomorrow.
there's a,
Like I
it's
aim
all
to be very hopeful.
to be helpful. Nothing but calm and light.
Yeah, I mean there are some things that it's like difficult situations, but not like, oh no, I got to, put on a pair of red hot slippers. Like, no. There was nothing, nothing like that. Like, yeah, it's all stuff that's like, oh my gosh, that's difficult. How do we work through this kind of thing? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
There's a Canadian songwriter, Bruce Coburn,
Uh huh.
and he's got a knack for writing these super smooth, warm, fuzzy melodies.
Hmm.
But the lyrics aren't always warm and fuzzy. It says, what?
Oh,
There's
interesting.
a bit of a disconnect between the way the sounds and what he's actually talking about. But
That's
he
so
wrote a
funny to see
he's
that.
he wrote a song called "The Trouble with Normal," and the line is the trouble with normal is it always gets worse.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
I don't think you and I have to worry about that too much, really.
No, I don't think so. No. I mean, like, my normal is weird and quirky. So as long as everything's always weird and quirky in some way, then my
Yeah,
normal is totally fine. So
yeah. No, it sounds like you have a lot of fun with
I
your
do.
with your own life and your stories and working with your clients. I think
I do.
I'm just going to say one of the things I have is what I do is I never know who's going to walk in the door. Every
I know.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
That's
and
true. That's true. Because you know what? Because people, when they publish their books, they can publish any kind of book that they feel called to, and so it keeps you on your toes as the person who's helping them to publish that book. Like, oh, what do we have now? Like, Is this a workbook? Is this a nonfiction book? Is this a fiction book? And each genre like just gets let your imagination run wild. So so I think Greg, because you're in the industry of, you know, where people let their imaginations go wild, like you just like you said, you just never know what's going to come through the door. So.
Yeah. One of the books I'm working on is a cluttering book. It's one of the best little decluttering books. But the author, the first thing we published for him was a book on how to kill ghosts with a Fender guitar. And anyway, the funny thing is that he keeps on getting invited to paranormal society conventions, right? And he doesn't believe in that at all. Like I just said, well, why would you buy a book, like 3 books on this topic when personally you have no connection to it at all? That's the world of fiction for you.
So, that's so funny.
I have lots of friends who don't have a problem with any of that stuff.
So. Well, you know what? I think you brought up a really good point that there's something called secondary audiences that not too many people think about, but like you may have a primary audience who wants to read a good fictional story, but then you might have a secondary audience who may zero in on one aspect of your story, like with this case with this guy, the paranormal people, who will resonate in that way when they, the author didn't mean to open that door, but it's a prime example of secondary audiences that you impact. So
yeah, really one of my most surprising audiences was years ago. I created some software, like a website, to show photos, and I have a friend who's legally blind. She liked my website because it worked with her adaptive software. She could see a little bit. And and she had some of her other blind friends who really liked the website. Like, who knew? You do a photo website, and
you never know.
And you got fans in the blind community. Which seems like
that is awesome. That is awesome, Greg.
But they weren't, they're legally blind, but they're not without sight. They just have some challenges.
Right. Yeah. But I think it probably you probably have become a person that feels like basically you're inclusive to them, like they will know you as an inclusive person to go to because you have a website that makes it easier for them to read versus the plethora of other websites that they have tried to read. I think that means so much to them.
Yeah, I didn't do it on purpose.
I know, but like
I wanted to make it simple and easy to get around, right? So
yeah. Well, I think it's a happy accident that I feel like that was. See, that's the gold in your story, Greg. That's one of the gold in your stories because it's like I didn't mean for this to happen, but it did, and it had this amazing positive effect with people who are legally blind. I think that's really cool. That's a cool story.
That's a cool story. Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's awesome. Yeah.
So this has been fun, and we should do it again. Actually, we should do it again when your book is launched.
Yes, we should do that. Yes, and that's
we should do an official book launch broadcast.
I would love that. Thank you. I would love to have another conversation with you once the book is launched. Yes. So thank you.
Okay. So reach out to contact Amy, go track her down and take a look and consider working with Amy. Make an appointment, at least have a chat about your story.
Yes, absolutely.
And what you might be able to do with it. So
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Greg, for having me on your broadcast. I really appreciate it.
Okay. All righty. See you later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.